What if we've lost sight of what matters most? Marriage, family, and the future of our children. In a culture where faith is faint and families are under pressure, what does it take to rebuild a strong foundation? Tim Goeglein has worked at the highest levels of government and now at Focus on the Family, calling Americans back to first principles. In his new book, he argues the future of the country will be shaped less by politics and more by what happens in our homes. Tonight, what we've lost and how we get it back. Don't go away. Tim Goeglein served in the White House under President George W. Bush, and today helps lead Focus on the Family, one of the nation's most influential family ministries. His new book, What Really Matters, argues that the crisis we see in the country is rooted in something deeper, the breakdown of marriage, family, and the formation of the next generation. It's not just a critique, it's a call to restore the foundations that once held the country together. Tim, welcome back to the program. It's good to see you again.
Joe, it is great to be back. It's a real honor.
Let me start here. In your book, you talk about restoring marriage, family, and even the role of men in the culture. When you look at the next generation of children right now, where do you think the breakdown is most serious?
Well, overwhelmingly, the breakdown, Joe, is most serious in what we used to call the natural nuclear family. And just very recently, in the last 10 days, we have had the newest numbers. Pat Moynihan said everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not everyone is entitled to his own facts. And the most recent numbers we have say that we are presently in America in 2026 at the lowest marriage and the lowest fertility rates in the history of our nation. And in fact, Joe, what I think is particularly sobering is that in 2025, we had more women in their 30s having babies than women in their 20s. This is not like ringing a fire bell in the night, to paraphrase Thomas Jefferson. This is what we are living through. The future of the country and the foundation of our constitutional republic is marriage, family, and parenting. And we've got to do a better job of telling the rising generation of young Americans the goodness of marriage, the goodness of babies, the goodness of kids.
Yeah, what are we seeing in terms of single parent households, or the number of women that are having babies out of wedlock, and also in many of those cases, the father may not be at all involved in raising the child. Are there any numbers about that?
Yes, I'm actually very honored you would ask that right at the top of our great conversation. I mentioned Pat Moynihan just a moment ago. A mere 62 years ago, a very famous demographer and a young man then, Pat Moynihan found that in 1964, Joe, 25% of Black Americans were born out of wedlock. That number today is about 70%. Among Hispanic Americans, that number is over 50%. And among native-born white Americans, about 33%. Here is the stunner. The majority of babies born to women at the age of 30 years of age and under, the majority of those babies are now born out of wedlock. And so while the political class here in Washington is saying that it's about the border and it's about taxes and it's about all the other things the political class says it's about, and of course those are all very important things, what it's really about, what really matters, which is why I chose to name my new book that, what really matters is the issues we're talking about, things of the spirit that relate directly to the health of our culture and ultimately to the health or to the weakness of marriage and family. It's really that important.
I would agree with you 100%. I know that I was blessed to grow up in a wonderful family. My parents did not have the benefit of growing up in two-parent households, and they realized how important it was and what they felt they had missed. And so they made a real effort when they got married that to be excellent parents to their 6 kids and to be present in our lives as well, not just to provide, but to talk with us and to encourage us
Yes.
and counsel us and to have dreams for us. They talked so matter of factly about us having careers, that we knew that this was something we would be headed to, that there was a purpose for us being on the planet, that God had made us for a reason, that we were headed in a direction, and we were excited about it. And my fear is I guess your book maybe outlines too what impact not having this has had on the country.
Absolutely. And by the way, in light, Joe, of what you just said, we honor single parents, overwhelmingly in America, single mothers, for what they're doing. And I really do mean that. What really matters is not a critique of any individual. And I think we're seeing a lot of courage and heroism these days in single parents. But I think what we want to stress is that every empirical data study, by the way, every can be a dangerous word, but in this instance, it's the case. In every single important empirical data study, the best thing for the raising of young boys and young girls is a two-parent intact family. Now, that sounds like saying the sky is up to a large number of Americans. But in fact, in many quadrants, as you know, Joe, what I've just said are considered fighting words. And in fact, I was in a conference just a couple of weeks ago on a major state university. And I said that while I love the word parenting, it's a great word. I said what I love even more is fathering and mothering, because fathers and mothers bring very unique sets of skills and different things to their little people. It's important to say that. So I think that we need to go tell a new generation, as I say, and that's principally why I wrote What Really Matters. We need to tell them that getting married is a great way to live your life. Committing your life to one other person, to having children together, to being a member of a faith community. And I'll tell you, I'm an inveterate optimist, Joe. We have all kinds of seedlings of restoration and renewal. I think we are actually seeing a kind of a quiet revival in 21st century America. I think there's reasons to be quite optimistic.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I just love what you're saying, and I love the fact that you're not beating down people who maybe are single mothers and the like. That you're trying to encourage them. I think that's a good thing. How do we move the society in the direction where we are encouraging people, even encouraging young people who may not have the example that you had or that I had about the two-parent household, about getting married and raising a family?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm going to be very specific. I wrote a whole chapter on it in What Really Matters. And the chapter is Restoring the American Male. And I'll tell you, the research about the rising generation of young men, largely ages 18 to 30, is very important for this reason. In this particular generation, we see large numbers of young men who of a sudden want to be married, they want to have children, they want to have a successful marriage in life, they want to be a part of a religious and faith community, and they want to make a genuine contribution. I mean, these are excellent, excellent things to see, and we should be encouraged by that. At the same time, Joe, we are seeing another part of this demographic that is really struggling. For instance, 15%. I mean, this is a large, complex continental nation. So 15% of 340 million people is a lot of people. About 15% of all American men tell reliable people who ask that they have no friends. I mean, that is stunning. And in an era of digital distraction, we had to live through COVID and the impact on relationships, friendships, marriages. I mean, it has had a real and often negative impact. So I think the specific answer to your question is we need to focus like a laser beam on the rising generation, but I think particularly among young men. Why is that? Because young women, same ages, aspirationally, they say, I want to be married, I want to have children. but they tell people reliably that there are millions of what they would say are unmarriageable men. These are men who are not in college, not seeking to be in college, not working, not looking for a job. The American Enterprise Institute's Nick Eberstadt, as you know, Joe, has done path-breaking research on this part of the demographic of young men. And we have to, as a country, not a political party, as a country, we have to come together and say, we can address this, we can do it successfully, and there are all kinds of things we can do, which I discuss in the book.
If we're talking to young people, Tim, who are maybe watching this program, and they're wondering to themselves, they're saying to themselves, I want to be a married person one day, like, even if they don't themselves come from a two-parent household, but they would like to get there. They'd like to be married someday and be a parent to their children. How does it start? And what about dating? Like, if you're a teenager or if you're in college, like, is there a correct path for dating? And is dating the way that you find perhaps the right person, the person that completes you, to put it in those movie terms, so that becomes your mate? Tell me a little bit
I
about
love that question. Yeah, I love that question because we are, in fact, and indeed, facing a dating recession, which is real. And George Orwell famously said that the first duty of an intelligent person is to restate the obvious. And we have to teach a new generation the idea of relationship and friend building. We are long past due for this. It's really okay in faith communities, in schools, colleges, universities, neighborhood associations, to reteach this generation about the proper way to meet other people. We simply have large percentages of young people, they don't know how to ask another person out on a date. They don't know how to have a sustained friendship or relationship. In other words, we need mentors. And the beautiful thing, Joe, is that we have all kinds of faith-based and neighborhood and community groups that offer this in major urban areas and ex-urban areas and rural areas, who are very eager to work with young people to teach them the art of the kind of thing we're talking about. And it's perfectly great if we can teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, and we need to do that. We can also teach human connection. And I think we have all kinds of people who are prepared and eager to do that.
What do we do? So you find that person that you want to marry, and they want to marry you, and you get married. Now, you don't have an example necessarily at home, because maybe you didn't admire your parents' marriage, or maybe your parents weren't married, or maybe your parents were divorced, or one of your parents, the one you lived with, has been divorced several times. How do you have a good marriage? How do you make sure you avoid those pitfalls and that you have a marriage that's meaningful and intact, where you're raising your kids and they're growing up in a healthy environment? How do you do that?
We at Focus on the Family, and there are many ministries that do this, but we at Focus on the Family have a wonderful ministry that I would commend to everybody who is hearing us or watching us today. It is called Hope Restored, and it is a remarkable part of Focus on the Family. As I say, there are other ministries who are doing similar things, but we systematically teach the rubrics of strong marriages. And we begin with the premise that millions of Americans are having a very difficult time in their marriage. We begin with the premise that there are other Americans who say, this is over. I mean, we've tried and we just can't make it work. The research shows overwhelmingly that with the right kind of intervention, marriage can not only be saved, but it can be made to flourish. We literally have thousands and thousands and thousands of examples where this is the case. So there is hope, and I'm very happy to say that for people who are eager to take us up on this offer, you merely tap into the Focus on the Family webpage, and Hope Restored is very prominent there.
Yeah, that's a good word and very helpful to everybody watching. Everybody wants to have a good marriage, but there seem to be few
Yes.
people that actually find that that sweet spot, that wonderful place. And marriage can be a wonderful and beautiful thing when two people love each other and they're honest with each other, and when they forgive each other too, because human beings are imperfect.
Yes.
We make mistakes. We need to be forgiven, and it's wonderful to be able to forgive and to be
Yes.
forgiven, and to have patience and the like. All these things are wonderful, helpful things. So I'm just so glad that you're raising this. This is really what does matter. This is why your book is so important right now. It's what really does matter in society. You know, the society, we don't move forward as a country, as a great country, if our families are not intact. You know, and if individuals don't purposely seek to marry and to have children and to have whole and healthy families and the like. So this is so critical in this time period. I know most people say that it has to do with, well, the economy. You know, the economy is what really matters. But I guess you would say that matters of the spirit are even more important than matters of the flesh.
Very much so. And in fact, I remember the very last time I saw Mr. Breitbart. We had become quite good friends. We were having coffee here in Washington. And he used the mantra, Joe, that we've all often heard, which is that politics is downstream from culture. And I said to my friend, politics is downstream from culture, but culture, I said, is downstream from things of the spirit. Where does healthy culture come from? It comes from faith and religion. It comes in a remarkable country like ours, in many communities of great faith. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons that I am a hopefulist, an illimitable optimist, is because despite what we may hear, there is a remarkable and measurable vibrancy in the things of the Spirit in the United States of America. I mean, here we are in the 250th year of our birth. Our friends in Spain, they don't know when they were born. Our friends in England, they don't know when they were born, but we know when and where we were born. We were born on January 4th, 1776 at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can't understand or even appreciate the greatness of our country apart from the Judeo-Christian tradition and the foundation of faith that helps to well up freedom. Our founders, our founding fathers and mothers, they all believed that the other side of freedom and the other side of liberty was moral excellence in the leaders and in the people. Where does it come from? It comes from things of the spirit. So if we ask ourselves, Joe, what kind of a country do we want 50 years from now? The answer has to include marriage, family, parenting, human life, religious liberty, all the things that I write about. But we also have to ask, where do we get those things? And we get those things from faith, from religion, and from the energy and dynamism that helps to flourish and nourish those great institutions.
Tim Goeglein is calling our attention back to what matters most: marriage, family, and the formation of the next generation. His new book, Is What Really Matters, is a timely reminder that the future of the country may depend less on what happens in Washington and more on what happens around kitchen tables. We'll be right back with more of this important conversation.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
As we've been talking about, restoring marriage, family, and faith, well, this doesn't happen by accident. It takes leadership, not just in Washington, but more importantly in our homes, our churches, and our communities. Men and women willing to step up and take responsibility. Because if we're honest, a lot of people are waiting for someone else to fix this. Tim, in a world you describe in your book, what kind of leaders do we need right now? And who needs to decide that that's me?
I'll tell you, the remarkable thing is that there are remarkable heroes walking around every city, county, and community in our country. They are often, not always, but they're often not the ones profiled in the papers, often not the ones that get a lot of attention in social media, et cetera, et cetera. And frankly, Joe, we meet them all the time. These are the people that I believe we need to hold up even as never before, because they are the best of us. they form a social fabric. And very often they're very quiet about the different vocations and ministries they have. I've written about a lot of these people over time. And one of the groups that I specialize in writing about in What Really Matters are people who have devoted their lives, many in faith-based communities, some not, but they have decided that they're going to live the rest of their lives by investing in young people. And very often they invest in young people who come from a culture of utter brokenness and dysfunction, often chaos. I met a group of young men and women here in Washington very recently. And I'll tell you, Joe, I only had to spend about a minute or two with them. Their joy and their sense of the country was infectious. And yet they, in their own home lives, had come from remarkable brokenness. And I asked them to a person, what is it that gives you this infectious sense of hope and joy about the future? And to a person, they shared that a mentor had intervened in their life, chosen them, and chosen to pour their lives into these young people. And I was overwhelmed just by the way that those relationships and investment of time had forever changed, a young life. One of my great friends in Washington is U.S. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Tim's story is remarkable. Growing up in South Carolina, and the way that various people intervened in Tim's life to give him a remarkable and better way forward. And the thing is, I remember discussing this with Tim the very first time, and he said to me, as another Tim, he said, there are thousands and thousands of people just like the ones who helped me growing up. I've never forgotten that. And over all of my years at Focus on the Family, I've had the opportunity to meet these people, and it's a joy to profile and to write about them and what they're doing. We need more people like that, and I feel confident we're going to get them.
Yeah, didn't Tim Scott grow up in a single-parent home?
He did indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, without a father.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And yet he rose.
Correct.
He rose to Congress and then to the United States Senate, which is just remarkable when you think about it. Just remarkable.
Yes, absolutely. And may I say, Joe, here's what I think is particularly important. We have to remember that George Washington grew up for many years without a father. Abraham Lincoln grew up with a dysfunctional relationship with his father, and his mother died young. Winston Churchill had a very complicated relationship with his father, and a father and mother who were very distant. We have all kinds of examples. Justice Clarence Thomas, a very difficult upbringing. And yet, look how these incredible people rose, not only because of the greatness of the country that allows them to do so, but overwhelmingly because of the individuals who intervened in their lives. It wasn't just good ideas or intelligence or perseverance. All those things are very important. But the common denominator with all of them is this remarkable intervention by many people, often not even related to them, who stepped up to the plate and said, I want to help this person rise. And I think that is a great challenge for us in 21st century America. And if we ask ourselves what really matters, the answer is that what really matters are marriages, families, parents, the kind of intervention and mentoring that is vital to the future of our nation.
This has been a wonderful conversation with my friend Tim Goeglein with a timely and important message. His new book is What Really Matters, a call to get our priorities straight by restoring marriage, strengthening families, and investing in the next generation. If you care about the future of the country, this is a book worth reading, and it's available right now wherever good books are sold. I'll be right back with some closing thoughts with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
What a great scene that was, Tim and young people. And he's a great storyteller, and he fills in the detail. So you see a bright group of young, prospective future congressmen or congressional aides or White House staffers. And then you realize they came from really hard circumstances, but they were the bright light that he hasn't forgotten. And the difference, as he said it, was a mentor, was a person who stopped long enough from busy lives. There's a sense, I think, in America generally that once you have achieved, it is time now for you to just kick back and enjoy. And what he is describing is a bit of a challenge to that system, and it's a gentle one, but it's to say that maybe you take a few days out of the month to very deliberately tell everything you have learned about relationships and marriage and raising children and finding jobs, building friendships. I mean, how many people today think of friendship as the art of maintaining a relationship, not just being comfortable with people you're in proximity with, or if they happen to be online, have a conversation with them. But when they drop off, when their light isn't on, how do you go find them and say, I'm with you in this? That's what he's describing, and it's a community that is in America that needs to be re-knit together, not just random people in proximity, but people that say, I drove 2 hours to see you because I felt you needed me to be there.
Yeah.
And that would change everything about the country.
Well, I'm so glad he wrote the book, What Really Matters, because this is what really matters.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the lack of connection, the fact that for so many young people, it's just hard. They don't even have a friend. They don't know how to make friends with somebody. They don't know how to sustain their relationship, a friendship.
Lonely in a crowd, in a sea of hundreds of names and profiles on TikTok and Instagram and every other social media connection, but deeply lonely. We can change that, and that's part of his optimistic message.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, the strongest societies are not built just on ideas or institutions, but on people who live out their convictions at home. It's exactly the call Tim Goeglein is making to restore what really matters by rebuilding marriage, strengthening families, and investing in the next generation. Maybe you've been feeling pretty alone in the way you see the world lately, or maybe you've been watching these problems up close in your home, in your own home, or a hard marriage, a divorce, a child or grandchild losing their way, or maybe you've just been overwhelmed by everything you're seeing and hearing day after day on your news feed. I hope this conversation with Tim Goeglein was the jolt of encouragement you needed to refocus your heart on what matters most. So let's recommit ourselves to loving God, loving our families, and caring for neighbors in need. That's where real change begins. Send me a line in the comment box at joewatkins.org. I'll read and respond to every message. And for Jeff Coleman and the entire team here at Lighthouse TV, thanks so much for making time for this conversation. From America's First Capital, I'm Joe Watkins. We'll see you again real soon.